Before the Industrial Revolution, the only people that thought about health and fitness, right, were athletes. And then like the Industrial Revolution, the machines basically uncoupled movement from functioning. I always started to get fat and diabetes, and all of a sudden, the thing that was just handled in the process of living had to become a domain of concern. I sense that circling is responding to that and is anticipating that, right? Where it's actually given that life is less and less interactive and relational, or requires less relationship, yet it's so integral to our well-being, our identity, our sense of significance. All the most important things to being a human being.
The container is now open. This is our second episode with Guy Sengstock. And this time around, we're going to be diving deep into the philosophy of the practice of circling. Jonathan would have done the intro, but unfortunately he is suffering from a severe allergy attack, making his face not suitable for audiences. He's laughing in the background. Now on to our interview with Guy Sengstock.
Because I think listening is the silent partner that we barely notice, that's actually the thing that's most determining everything. And there's something about having that be explicit and having it be somewhat anonymous, right? That makes it even more powerful.
In the Gospels, Christ recommends, if you're praying, rather than praying out loud in the public square, best to go off on your own, close the door, and pray in private where only the Father can hear you, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's that sense of eternal listening that happens at the foundation of reality, that you're always listened to, that there is always what you're talking about, this embrace of the emanation of you is always being caught and considered.
Yes, totally. And kind of we don't even leave home without it. I'll never forget this one time I was out hiking, like in the middle of nowhere. It was obvious no one was around. In fact, I was doing it so that no one was around. And I tripped over a rock or something and fell down. And I immediately felt embarrassed and blushed. And then all of a sudden I noticed like how embarrassed I was. And I was like, oh God, like I'm so funny, right? No, I know no one's here. And I'm thinking that thought as I'm getting up. I'm being very composed getting up, right? Like I'm almost pretending like that didn't. I was like, wait a minute, I'm still doing it. And I thought about that afterwards, right? I was hiking. I was like, oh yeah, I think there's this, like what it is to be human is to have an always sense of the other, right? Is watching, is listening, right? Like the other, even when we're alone, is still there in some deep way, right? Such that when you trip and fall, you blush, even when no one's there, because there's a kind of like, I don't know, an ontological sense, right? To be human is to be heard. To be human is to always possibly be seen. And I would imagine that has more power than we can understand.
Whoa, I'm connecting that to like the inner path journey through circling. And circling is like a relational art. So we think of circling as something you do with others, I think. I mean, I think most people would sit, if they close their eyes, they're like, okay, circling happens in a room with people.
Yeah.
But it like never, you leave the event, you drive home, there's still this relational process unfolding inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then like the discipline of circling is actually always this at play, or it can be at play, I guess.
Yeah. My friend Mark says, he's like, to be me is to have many me's in me, right? And the only problem is that I just have one mouth, right? The one mouth problem. Like we're multiples, right, coming together. And I think that that's in some sense we kind of, I've one of the things I've really appreciated is speaking about having kids. This because I have a 23-year-old and I have a 4-year-old, and so I feel like I've just had more of a keen witness of kind of studying, right, in some sense, as I'm parenting him, like, what is happening? How does this little kind of helpless, vulnerable, dependent kind of blob, right, turn into a person and watching him turn into a person? And it's funny, as far as I can tell, it's all relationship. Like, it's all
Yeah.
like, from the beginning, it's like how close the baby is to the mother and, like, everything from the breastfeeding, having just come out of a person, the 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 coordination of, like, making faces at up and, like, learning how close to be and when too's far, and now that he's, like, starting to have some of that male aggression, which is where daddy comes in, it's every single moment with him and daddy. He's always testing limits. It's like wrestling and, you know, playing games, but mostly like roughhousing. And it's interesting because I could feel this primitive thing in me come up with him. It's like we know it's like daddy time. It's time to body slam daddy because he's got a need to do that. And I think what's happening is he's something really important is going on there. He's like pushing he seems to be all about pushing boundaries, pushing edges, right? And figuring out when's too far and like what's not in that all that playing, right? And that roughhousing is actually this thing where he's getting to know like and how to be with the he's being socialized, right? Like he's learning where to stop and where to begin and what's too far and so it's really fun, but there's actually something quite sacred going on in that roughhousing, right? That's really, I really appreciate. But I mean, all this to say, right? By the time his brain is developed enough to kind of curl back on itself and say I for the first time, like whatever he touches to say I, and go, that's me, I think it's a complete donation from the inner subjectivity he's been swimming in, right? And my sense is like, human beings become people in and through people, especially in the beginning. And, I mean, we know that because we go to therapy, right? What are we dealing with? All of the way that thing fucked up, right? All of our twitches and overcompensations and psychology knows this really well. It's like, well, your original relationships and like these betrayals that you went through and like all of that kind of stuff because those relationships are like we internalize people, right? We internalize people we admire and we imitate them, right? In these profound ways. And I think that's supposed to happen through our whole life. I think that's supposed to happen through our whole life, that we become people in and through other people. Because at some level, if you think about it, like, how do I know I'm me? Right? Like if you put me as a baby on a desert island, right? Like say I could somehow survive, right? And you leave me there for 50 years and then you come back and you show up and you go, Guy, so what's it like? And you'd be like, what's a guy? Who's a guy? Right? Like, because I never had that reflected back to me, that responsiveness to me, right? Is how in some sense, I catch the other seeing me, right? And it's like through, like almost like an empathetic process of like somehow following the other, I start to locate myself and the boundaries of me and, what's great about me, what sucks about me, all those kinds of things in some sense are fashioned by our relationships all the way down. So when you think about circling as a relational practice, on one level, we're talking about how to have good relationships in our life, but on another level, we're exercising the very plumbing of what makes us human, right? In the most ordinary sense, right? In the most, you know, existential, fundamental sense.
I was introduced to this art form last summer called the Durodango. It's like
The Durodango, I like it already.
Durodango. It's a Japanese like Zen art form of just taking mud and
Mm.
making it into a ball. And you just use your hands, and the more you work the ball, it turns into a sphere, and it becomes more and more shiny, and it ends up looking like this beautiful
Huh.
piece of clay that was, put into an oven, and this gorgeous
Yeah.
shiny ball of dirt.
Yeah.
But in the practice of forming that and shaping it, it was over the course of weeks, and I remember having all of these huge like downloads about relationship and about how, it's like you're in this relationship with this ball
Yeah.
and it's almost like that Tom Hanks movie where he ends up having the relationship with the
With Wilson, the
Wilson
tulpa.
with the
Yeah.
yeah. Like I started having conversations with the Durodango and like realizing things about myself in there was also the reflection piece, because the more I worked it, the more I could see myself in it. And
Like literally.
yeah,
See yourself in it.
I
Yeah.
remember I dropped it that one day and it got a cut, and I was
Mm.
like so worried that Durodango had a cut. Anyway, that's just what kept coming up from me, is this kind of like the shaping and the working and then the seeing of oneself in the other, and yeah,
Yeah.
kind of off topic, but also like exactly on topic,
Mm.
at least in
Well, I
my
appreciated just that what you drew out there, because it's like, it's not just you forming this, something pushes back, right?
yeah.
Right? There's an element to, I mean, being an artist, yeah, I moved to San Francisco to go to the San Francisco Art Institute. I was a sculptor and a painter.
Wow.
And a lot of people who aren't artists think about artists as like they have something in their mind and they put it out there. But
Right.
that's not the experience at all, right?
No.
Like, in fact, if you picture like the studio, right, with all the students down there painting, usually people picture like artists kind of making marks and painting and maybe sweating. But that's actually not what you find at all. Like, you find a bunch of artists in there, and they're all standing by their painting, and they're looking at it from every single angle, right? And then hesitantly, they go and they make a mark. And then they step back, and it's like the next 10 minutes, right? Maybe they smoke a cigarette and they talk to somebody else, and then they're coming back and they're looking at it. Because it's this really interesting thing where when you make a mark, there is an intention that you have, but it's always more or less than you thought, right?
Right.
Something pushes back. And so you have to have this conversation with it, right? Because
Right.
it's as much telling you what it is as you are. And so actually art is this, it is that's why artists are the worst people to talk about the meaning of their art, right?
Mhm.
Because at some level, what actually did it, right? Like, in fact, I mean, artists, there are artists who people have gotten all this stuff out of their work that the artist had no intention around, right? But I think it's that experience of this between, right?
Yes.
That is this thing that comes up. Yeah. So I really appreciated what you're talking about, this visceral sense, like how you would get a download about how relational that is.
Yeah.
That has me. I'm really captivated by this idea that works of art, not all works of art, but you can certainly sometimes sense it, where some like needed to come out, and they found the artist. This is how my mind models that, is that yeah, some kind of entity of some sort needs to be brought into
Mm,
this
hmm.
thing we're in,
Yeah.
whatever you call this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it finds the artist, and then the artist really their mastery has nothing to do with understanding the art or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's the mastery of being able to listen and render and like make to literally realize what they're sensing on this like spirit like my experience is that spirit doesn't really speak in very good English. It's not very
Yeah.
straightforward. It's this weird other more like musical vibration and harmony and I think of it as like the sinuses of reality kind of like hum in
Yeah.
different ways. Um yeah, and that and so that is a relational practice. If you want to build the reality that way, it's a relational practice with a being that you can't even see yet or understand. But
Nor
yeah,
predict.
and then that has me wonder how much else works that way.
Yeah. It's a little bit more like midwifing.
Mm.
It's a lot more like midwifing, because it's like, the big thing with painting, right, is, man, it's hard to know when it's done,
Yeah.
right? Like, in fact, if you try to make it done, you're just gonna be in the studio for hours, like, just because you just messed it up, or if you go too long, like, knowing when it's done is this thing it tells you, right? There's an otherness to it that's really kind of strange to think about, right? But it does have its own life, right? And I also noticed this when I did my first show, and I didn't know enough because it was my first. I didn't know enough, so I did it in the coffee shop I went to every morning. And it's such an I learned so much about what art was, right, when I was there, because I was, there getting my coffee, and I was super ambitious. I did these like 8 by 10-foot paintings, so it wasn't mild, right? Like, it was everywhere. It filled all the walls, and I'd be half awake getting my coffee, and then I'd sit down and kinda like, start to wake up, and people in line, of course, would start talking about this weird painting up there. And they would just get all these things out of it, right? Where I just would be like, "No, that's not what I meant. That's not." I had to stop going to that coffee shop, right? But one of the things I realized in that is, like, actually, who owns that? Like,
Mm.
who am I to say, actually, right, what that meant? Like, there were my intentions in whatever way they were realized. But actually, there's something about art that like, seems to induce a dialogue, right? You see through it. And, like, it's that process that actually, I think, is where the art actually arts, right? It's not what the intention was of the painter, right? In that sense. And I really learned a lot about that, right? That there's something more. And I guess that's what distinguishes, like, not art from art, right? Like, uh, who was it? Was it Keats or Yeats that talked about the difference between art and pornography? And he considers, like, all marketing pornography, basically. And he says where art kind of has you step back and have this, like, dialogue with it at some level. He says where pornography, right, is where the movie starts and it just takes you on a ride, right? Like, the more involved and the more unthinking you are, and the more it just takes you on this whole thing and your feelings and all that kind of stuff, and, like, puts you into a certain direction, right? And he says that's pornography. Whereas
Yeah.
art has this element of, like, you don't quite exactly know what you're looking at, and it draws you in, and it brings up these elements, and it has one kind of, kind of, in some sense, it it shines forth something real, right? But involve requiring your participation, right, in the matter. That's kind of like one of the ways to think about what is art versus what isn't art, right? Or pornography.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's interesting the way you're describing that. reminds me of circling, the practice of circling,
Hmm.
you know, and the way that we would be with another
Hmm.
in the practice is you know, I think that the magic really comes through beholding in
Yeah.
terms of art versus
Pornography.
right, in terms of
Yeah.
pornography.
Well, that's
I
interesting
wonder.
too, because I think a lot of authentic relating and circling spaces, and a lot of just relational practices in general, can be titillating, and not just like erotically, but like they can be, ooh, like we're gonna get really edgy or something, or like cuddly, or there's ways that you can just press buttons of your neurochemistry, but can you engage it? Yeah, like you're saying, is
Hmm.
it's an
Yeah.
art.
Yeah. Totally.
Mm.
Totally. Yeah. The, the, you said something, use the word beholding,
Mhm.
right? Circling and this experience, like you just use that word to behold another. Say more about
Yeah.
what you meant there.
I think of it in terms of I think the other word that comes to mind is devotion.
Mm.
Um, uh, being in presence and not wavering from commitment, like a commitment to the other.
Yeah.
So I think of beholding
Yeah.
as committing
Yeah.
to being in presence with another in devotion
Yeah.
of like their humanity or of their personhood or of
Yeah.
their um like vibe, aura, like whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um so it's something about holding steady in presence and
Right.
something like that.
Right.
Behold.
Mm.
I think what I'm hearing is this kind of presupposes that there's something that you understand about a person, right? In such a way that like calls forth devotion is an appropriate way to be,
Mm. Mhm.
right? Like I sense in that something like, because this is a mystery to me.
Yeah.
It's like mystery, not like a missing of information that I don't know. It's more like a mystery the way a sugar cube is sugar all the way through, right? It's kind of mystery all the way through. But it's this sense of, it's like asking ourselves, what are we really before when I'm before another? Like what is it? What am I actually looking at, right? When I'm looking at a person, right? In fact, like in the Circling Institute, we do all these practices where we just kind of dwell in that question as we face each other, right? And like use minimal things that we say to hint at apprehending, right? Really being with what is it to be with a human being as a human being, right? And it's something I think when we're looking at a person, it's it's like it seems like there's something about a person that's inexhaustible, right? Like to behold something, right, is to hold it open for what's going to come forth or what withdrawals. But this kind of holding seems to already understand. It's intelligent because it already understands something essential about what you're across, right? In a real way. Like I would say it's like one thing that seems to be true is as far as I can tell, if I'm really with you, you'll always outlive my conception of you,
Mm.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, this
like we could sit before each other for like 1,000 years, right?
yeah.
And say fucking everything, right? Moment by moment, all the things, all the secrets, all the da, 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 we can disclose ourselves forever. And we still won't arrive at like a summary period. Okay, that's you. All right, done. finally, it's been 1,000 years. We figured it out, right? There's something about a human being that is inexhaustible, right? Inexhaustible.
That
But
I love that word, inexhaustible.
yeah,
I think I take issue with this idea of like, do you feel met? And it's like, well, no, actually, I don't think that I can feel met. And not to say you're not trying, not to say I don't want to be, but I don't know. I think inexhaustible is a better, or that's like touches on what that kind of frustration in me is
Mm.
of like I can see you'd like to meet me, and I want to be met, and that term it
yeah,
irks me. But sorry
yeah,
to interrupt. I really love that's very eloquent
yeah.
the way that you put it.
Mm.
Yeah, being met has this. Yeah, I could get it. Being met implies like a surface area, right? That I can just meet, right? Like if my surface area covers your surface, okay, good, done. Next.
Right. Isn't this a fascinating discussion? I bet it makes you really want to support the work that we do here at The Container. The best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/thecontainer and make small or large monthly donations. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave a rating or a review. This really helps us grow our show. And now back to our discussion with Guy Sengstock.
The meta practice, right, that's going on when I circle, right, is actually attuning and actually almost developing a sense organ for that inexhaustibility, right? And it's interesting because, and I think I'm not sure about this, but I think that when you behold that, or you encounter that, or you experience that, I think this is what people mean when they say sacred, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the qualities of it, when you really get it, right, is it it's not just an observation. It it communicates something about it, kind of puts you in right size, right? There's a like a there's a there's not it's an uncontrived humility, right? When you really touch that in someone. Because it's like this, to perceive it is to simultaneously recognize my own inadequacy to be bigger than it. It's got its own luminosity, right? So there is this kind of quality of like it's inexhaustible in the sense that it withdraws into a mystery. Yet but you contact it because something shines forth from it. So it's this kind of shining forth, right? Where its very shine is lighting up this kind of withdrawal into a mystery. And in some sense, I kind of feel like what we're doing in circling is we're all kind of being with each other, and we're feeling into that spot, right? Attuning into that spot. And it's so interesting because one of the things I notice is like when I hit it, I want to like say prose, right? It's like, and it's funny because it's like the thing begs the very words it bucks. It's this begging, bucking thing, right? Like you can't not try to express it, right? It's so unique, right? Yet it kind of speaks everything all at once. That thing, and I think that in circling, if you kind of like step back and kind of squint your eyes a little bit, and you just kind of look at what are we actually doing? It's like, oh, we're feeling into that place. We're attuning to and being attuned by that place. Because I think something in us knows that that's where meaning is. That's where, like, that's our connection to what is most significant, most important in all things, right?
That to me feels like so deeply captures the reason I think circling is the pinnacle of in my experience, the pinnacle of spiritual practices because it gets me there.
Yeah.
It gets me there regularly.
Yeah.
And it's that, yeah, and I just love the way you put this, where it's shining out from, it's coming to and receding from you. Like
Yeah.
mystery has this effect of, like, as you reach for it,
Yeah.
it unfolds and gives you gifts the whole time,
Yeah.
but there's always more to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's got a
And
calling element. It withdraws but calls, right? So it's got this
right.
kind of, it almost has this, it in some sense confronts you, right? Because it, you realize your inadequacy in the face of it, but not in this kind of cowering way, but in this way that inspires you to want to somehow imitate that thing, right? Like the way
Mm.
like you admire it, right? It's got this as you see it, you yourself are disclosed, right? In a certain sense.
It it has me thinking of, like, Meister Eckhart and this idea of
Oh, Meister. All right, pull up the
the
sleeves. We're gonna get out Meister.
yeah.
Yeah.
This way that the degree to which the things that you know about the person you're observing, and for Eckhart, or Meister Eckhart, we would say, like, God, his, like, negative theology is kind of true in circling. It's like if I'm with Sai, the more and more I know about Sai is actually like those are things that are confirmed, not the core.
Yeah.
It's like they are transiently true through my observation of Sai, but they're actually those are actually the things that aren't core to
Yeah.
Sai.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as I move into it to reach to the core, I find these things that are these jewels
Yeah.
that are also not the thing.
Yeah.
And it is like, yeah, it's like a negative theology, an interpersonal negative theology.
Yeah, totally. This it sounds like she's kind of an icon in a certain sense, right?
Yeah, right.
Like in that way that I
It's
guess
like
all
this
symbology
icon.
kind of does this, but it's like an icon is icons are really funny looking. If you just kind of look at them, they look like people, but they're nothing like people, like, and these symbols and things. And it's because and there was even historically, there was a kind of a, schism between the Orthodox and, the Western, because the Western started like making them all realistic and stuff. And the Eastern were like, no, you're missing the point, right? Like, because you're supposed to look through an icon,
Hmm.
right? It's like, it's an entry point where you look through it, right? Into something, unrepresentable, right? And yeah, and you're right. Eckhart really has that sense about him. I actually I have a bunch of just me reading his sermons on YouTube and then riffing on them. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
I
got like they have like 2 viewers, but look for like the lowest viewed ones. Those are them.
Well, they're about to have 3,
Yeah,
guy.
totally.
I can tell you that much.
But this kind of way where this is kind of the thing that struck me about reading him is, yeah, he really captured that apophatic sense, right? Of that is precisely because he talks about you should let go of God, right? And he has this notion of the Godhead, right? Which is ultimately ineffable, right? And so he's constantly doing these, if he would have lived long enough, they would have killed him, right? And they kicked him out of the church. But man, it's funny too, because he was at the end, he was like preaching to these farmers in 1300 in Germany. And I'm like, how did they even comprehend him? Right? I can barely like I can barely make out what this guy is saying
Oh,
because it's so deep. But there's this quality. One of the things he talks about is this sense of loving God, right? And I think that's at the heart. There's that's at the heart of kind of Christ in my understanding, right? In the depth. He basically is like, all right, look, just love God with all your heart. And like, you really don't have to worry about all the commandments. Like, if you do that, the commandments will just like, will naturally pop out and bore fruit. Like, you don't have to think about the commandments if you just love God with all of your heart. And then of course, he does this thing is like, well, but here's the problem. What makes you think you can love God? Right? Like, and he's like, you can't love God because only God can love God. So if you love God,
then you're God.
it's God.
Yeah.
Right? This way of kind of this devotional way of so pouring yourself in an agapic with an agapic mindfulness, right, into the other, right, is something of the other, right, catches hold, right? It's a way of, in some sense, becoming God.
Mm. You know, Christ's two commandments of loving God and loving the other,
Mhm.
and those are often said. It's like, you know, those are just the same thing, different
Yeah.
words to say the same thing, and that is so connecting to this. My ability to understand this of like really in any relational practice or really any relationship you have in the moment you're alive right now, the degree to which you can love the other is direct access to
Yeah.
divinity or
Yeah.
to, yeah, it's just that, like, there it already is. The whole thing is right there in that connection, that one connection.
Yeah. Yeah. That kenosis, this kind of self emptying.
Hmm.
Yeah, that answers this ongoing inquiry I've had with this work I've been doing, working with people on their deathbed, like in the moment that they're dying. I'm working very closely with a lot of people in that space, and this ongoing inquiry of like, why is it so? It's like directly. There, it's like you can circle with someone on their deathbed and they have no idea what the beholding and the being with and the being in connection is it's just there. It's just immediately there.
Mm.
And, there's I yeah, this conversation is sort of answering that question of, like, why is it that
Mhm.
you can just walk in? I mean, I think there's some obvious reasons why, like, it's the end, there's this liminal space, there's,
Mm.
the stakes are sort of high, but also sort of lower than they've ever been in some ways, and so there's, like, a direct line of, like, heart-to-heart connection with
Yeah.
someone where you can ask almost anything and it's not gonna seem shocking, and you
Yeah.
can be in the longest awkward silence, and it doesn't feel awkward or, what would be conceived as awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're saying that there's just people who just seem to have that on 10 all the time, and you can feel it the moment you're around them.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. 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 I really appreciate those people
Hmm.
quite a bit. Quite a bit. And the generosity, right, that comes, because strangely, because in some sense they're self emptying, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a room making, right, for the other's heart, right? In such a
Hmm.
way that really does not have conditions.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like it's, if you've made it this long and you can talk and you're a person, that's totally because of agape, right? That sense of, because you think about it, like, you know, if you went from this little amoeba and you got to the point where you're talking and you have a first name and a last name that you understand, that's you. That is all agape. So in some sense, agape precedes all of us, right? Like, because there's nothing that little kid can do to earn it, can't pay you back. It can't say thank you, right? So so if you care for this child, it's completely not transactional, right? And it's so funny that John Vervaeke talks about this, is like how he has this great way of talking about it, where it's like agapic love is what makes people, right? It's what literally makes people. And you can even say, you can think about that historically in some sense. It's like one of the things how Christianity like spread and was emerged and eventually actually became like the religion of Rome in some sense, because at some point, the only people that were kind of people were the Romans. But he was basically saying like the poor, all of them, right? Right? I behold you in such a way that you become person, right?
Right.
And that kind of like
Mm.
blew away all the structures from the bottom up of the whole Roman Empire, right? Because all of a sudden everyone started being people.
Being of service, and in whatever moment you're in, how can I be of the most service in this moment is
Yeah.
to the moment, like not even to the other, or it's like, I think of that in parenting. I think of that in, the work I do, and in circling, it's like, that's how
Mm.
that's how you're a person is,
Mm.
Yeah.
looking toward like where is the
Yeah.
service here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Which really puts us, I mean, which really kind of presencing all of this, right? In some sense has me get really present to the peculiar time that we're in,
Mhm.
right? Which this time birthed circling, right? In a deep way, right? And I didn't realize that it was about like that circling was actually in response to this time in a particular way, right? And was kind of starting to anticipate a need and have a way of responding to it until years later,
Mm.
right? But if we kind of like, as we said, all this stuff about relationship, like, yeah, man, human beings are relational all the way down, right? Like, and it's kind of supposed to be like that for our whole lives. But I think something really, in my thinking about it, and I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, but um, I think technology really kind of came to a point where something really big happened. Um, and I think the first intimations of it was the answering machine, actually, of all things, right? Whereas, like, before the answering machine, I'll put it like this: before the answering machine, life was such a way that if you had to exchange information, right, with another person, you had to actually, you actually had to talk to them, at least on the phone. Right? There's lots of one-way communication, radio and TV and all that kind of stuff, right? But when it came down to like, if you had to have an exchange, right? It was always coupled to the body, to the relationship, to the voice, this, you know, deeply normative thing, but also this kind of like awkward thing that, anything could happen called a conversation, right? Um, But I remember once the answering machine kind of came on, I remember starting to like think to myself, I don't want to talk to this person. Oh, I know they're not home right now, so I'll just leave a message, right? And that was the beginning of it. Um, and then that turns into, texts, emails, social media, right? And like right now, you the three of us probably have identities in internet spaces that are having conversations that we probably won't even know about, right? On some level. I don't even know what to make of that, right? But but to think about this, that where communication got uncoupled from relationship. Like it became optional. Now, if we kind of think about the implications of that, right? Basically, what we just made optional is the way people become people.
Yeah.
Think
Wow.
about that for a second.
Huh.
And here's the thing is other human beings have always been terrifying, right? Like I have snakes in the garden that like, if I knew about, I probably wouldn't tell you about, that will come out only in the relationship with you and vice versa, right? It's like we can have a conversation and you could say something to me that I misunderstand that puts me in therapy for 10 years, right? Like, or you can say something to me that I misunderstand that enlightens me and turns me into Buddhahood, right? And one level, there's a kind of normativity to relationships and conversations, but it's also got this element, right, where so much can happen in a single conversation. That's a lot to deal with. And that coordinated sensory motor thing that we're doing is like how we continue to be, right? And become, right? The characters that we are.
Mm.
And so what happens when you make that optional? And our nervous systems will always just move towards, will just, instinctively move towards the path of least resistance, right? And so instead of making the phone call, I'll like send you a text, right? Instead of like going over to my friend's house, I'll just send a group chat. Or, I mean, all these ways that we have, for the most part, I would imagine most of the people that we relate to now are asynchronistic communications, right? Mediated conversations and communications. Synchronistic, right, is become something totally optional. And so if you kind of really kind of sit with that, right, it becomes incredible in my estimation, right? The thing that happened, and that's the world that we're in right now. And so you can see, I've been doing some research around some of the stats, right? And I wanted to know, one of the things I wanted to know was the average amount of time people spent with other people per day through time, right? And I could get back as far as 1840, right? Where you can get reasonably accurate, records of that. So the average person in 1840 spent just under 8 hours a day, right? In unmediated, right, contact with other people, right? Doing chores, working together, doing, all the stuff. And then you kind of like, you watch it go through time and it's like, it does this little dip for a while. And then you see TV and it goes down like this, right? And then you see the computer and it goes down like this. And you see the iPhone, and it goes down like this. And then it hits COVID and it basically almost reverses. It just like turns inside out or something. It goes like straight down. And so the person in 1840 was, just under 8 hours a day with people. And now we're down to the average 25-year-old male spends less than 30 minutes a day in relationship with other people. Like, now that's not to say that, for example, another one, I mean, some of these things are just remarkable. Like, I saw this stat of people married by the time they're 30. I think it went to 1950 and it was like 93% of women were married by the time they were 30. I think it was 89% of men. And you watch the numbers go down till now. 23% of women are married by the age of 30. And like, it's like somewhere in the low teens with men. And then you're looking at the birth rates, like, and then there's all this stuff about people aren't having sex anymore, right? Like the people aren't having kids, right? Like all these things are going on. And it's funny, I hear some of it talked about, but I don't get the sense that we are being struck by it, right? Because what we're looking at is basically we're looking at the way that people have felt significance and meaning in their lives, right? Is in their relationships, right? That's where that happens. And we're watching all of the, all the forms of the normal forms of that, like become optional, right? In this strange way. And so I think circling, right, arose in 1998 in like, mid 90s to late 90s, right in the Bay Area, which was at the heart of the whole internet boom, the dot-com boom, and then all the other tech booms. Because I was trying to answer the question for years, like, why did circling kind of like spread all over the world, especially when it was a bunch of dorks running it, right? Right. It was kind of like, it was my question is like, because, I could imagine really smart people like trying to do that and just failing every time. Right. But somehow this just spread. And for the life of me, I couldn't quite figure it out. I always tried to understand it by understanding like the methodology of it. Is it da 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 da? And then years later, I started to realize like, oh, whoa, right? This is to if especially when you look at the way circling really came to be a kind of dojo for relationship, right? You start to get that it's like in some level something was attuned to, right? That relationship is going to be and this is what I predict is like at some point people are going to start to think about their connections and their relationships like they do their health now, right? Like they do their fitness. Before the Industrial Revolution, the only people they thought about health and fitness, right, were athletes, right? Because life was hard enough, right? You had to go to the bathroom, you had to dig a hole, right? There's so much movement, right, coupled with life. And then like the Industrial Revolution, the machines basically uncoupled movement from functioning. I always started to get fat and diabetes and all these kinds of things. And all of a sudden, the thing that was just handled in the process of living had to become a domain of concern. So much that if I walk across and I ask the guy walking on the street, like, if you, how's your fitness? And he'll have a whole story already made about why he's not going to the gym and he really should, right? Like it's a domain of concern that people really need to take up. And I sense that circling at some level is responding to that and is anticipating that, right? Where it's actually given that life just doesn't itself just doesn't is less and less interactive and relational or requires less relationship, yet it's so integral to our well-being and all of these things, our identity and all of these kinds of things, our sense of significance, all the most important things to being a human being. I have a feeling that it's like connection and relation, right, is going to be something that is actually something akin to the way that we take up and take responsibility for our bodies. Is something that we actually have to think about to nurture, right?
Yeah.
The dialectician in me, I'm thinking about that in terms of like a dialectical materialist perspective of the very age it comes about that takes away relationality as a given, creates the kind of crisis that induces an even deeper like a practice that brings us into the depths of relating.
Yeah.
So there's such a weird spirit at work thing there where,
Mhm.
and I love that, yeah, it's born in almost the same zip code.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, that just confirms it as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. Yeah, there's some weird, like, grand spirit narrative unfolding that like we have to go into crisis to be brought into a deeper form of relating than maybe humanity's ever had, or a more mature
Yeah.
more, yeah,
Well, it's
through
I
circling.
think what at least what it's done with circling is it's moved it from quantity of relation, right, to an emphasis on quality, right? Like I think that's what I think circling really does is it homes into the qualitative aspect of relation. So it's like it's not like because I'm thinking about like relationships with the people in the 1950s. I mean, they don't look like I don't see them having super deep conversations, or something like that. They were probably a little bit more like kinesthetically, sensory motorly more coordinated or something like that. But it's not like they were like talking about God more or like,
Right.
realizing the ultimate reality in another's gaze, right? Like that, that wasn't going on. So
Yeah, but you could have a garden party and, all your neighbors
People
would show up.
Yeah, people would show up.
absolutely. Absolutely.